Welcome to the Real CP Show. I'm your host, CP. Today's topic called Half to One Generation Left for American Black Survival Overall. Half to one generation left for American Black Survival Overall. See, topics like this is what I like to call the rhino on the couch. Yes, the rhino on the couch. Sometimes we hear the words, some people, right? You hear this, uh, the, the elephant in the room, right? When things are so ridiculous, right? There's an elephant in the room. Well, I'm just adding the rhino in a room. Oh, excuse me, the rhino on the couch. See, that elephant might be in a room depending on what size your room is. You may have a big old loft. You might have all kinds of stuff going on. But that rhino on the couch is basically right next to you. See, this is what the half to one generation left for American Black survival overall is about. The rhino on the couch. That quite a number of personnel within the culture, quite a number of personnel within the predominant-based culture, and certainly numbers of personnel within no Pacific cultures, ethnicities, numbers of personnel within certain types of term lifestyles, etc., 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 etc. Don't really want to talk about. They don't want to talk about this. Different cultures, ethnicities, again, various types of no percentage amounts of alternative lifestyle categories. You got a person that don't want to talk about the rhino on the couch. See, it's too many internal problems that's going on within American Black culture. There's too many internal problems with few percentage points. And that is the way supremacy wants it. And sometimes people want to call it white supremacy or use the word white supremacy, right? Me, myself, I really don't even use the word white supremacy, but just myself and maybe some, a few other people out there, because very few amount of American blacks that say use white supremacy are put in the context, and certainly numbers of personnel within the predominant-based culture, numbers of personnel within the predominant-based culture utilize white supremacy, very generically, right? Overall on that, with few exceptions to that. And then, the extremely nerve part is when you have different other cultures, no Pacific ones, ethnicities, no Pacific ones, alternative lifestyle categories, no Pacific category, right? And personnel that want to use the word white supremacy, right? It's kind of atrocious because when you don't use that in context, right, it's just become like a cool word to use white supremacy. Yes, white supremacy, right? But still, again, see, but I use the word supremacy because when people use white supremacy, they're usually talking about, the number of whites that do this and do that, right? As if, I don't want to go in detail too much of that, but you got numbers of personnel that don't want to talk about numbers of Asian personnel that can't stand black folks. Numbers of Hispanic personnel that can't stand black folks. Numbers of Hispanic personnel that have their own Asian supremacy. Numbers of Hispanic personnel have their own supremacy. Excuse me. The numbers back to numbers of Asian personnel that have their own supremacy. But that's one of those, again, rhinos on the couch. Just as, again, you got good numbers of Hispanics, good numbers of Asians. You have numbers of Asian personnel that can't stand other Asian personnel. Shh on that. You got numbers of Hispanic personnel that can't stand numbers of other Hispanics. Shh on that. right? But see, again, that's the type of elephant or skin right on the couch, a different kind of conversation that many people don't want to talk about. You got people personnel that say Asian. What does that mean? Because you got Afro-Asiatics. Oh, different conversation that definitely a lot of people don't want to talk about. You certainly got Afro-Hispanics that a lot of people don't want to talk about. But the point is half to one generation left for the American black survival overall. See, because the question, or one of the questions should be, what other culture for generations to present who have been the most racially oppressed, the most racially discriminated against, the most racially Jim Crow law, racial terrorized, and still go no reparations? What other culture? Because there is no such thing. Because the American black overall is the most to the present for many generations have been the primary culture that has been the most racially terrorized, the most racially disrespected, the most racially treated inhumanely for generations before many cultures even existed within a country. Half a generation, one generation left. I mean, that right there is a home run in itself. That quite a number of personnel from different cultures, ethnicities, no percentage parts of our term lifestyle categories, there is no comparisons. Right? But unfortunately, you got millions of African and Native Black personnel that's allowing personnel from different cultures, ethnicities, a certain type of terms or lifestyle categories to sit there and not just jump on the bandwagon, build towns and stuff like that, jump on some bandwagons, jump on a darn sailboat, right? Jump in a fast car, do skydiving, whatever they can do to get on the numbers of personnel not being qualified as generations to sit there and try to pretend that they sit there and experience the same thing as numbers of American blacks for generations. And then when you sit there and corner numbers of personnel, oh, well, really, not really necessarily. Oh, please. Because you do got numbers of personnel that try to play that little game in some kind of little devilish type of way. They know who they are. But see, again, they know millions of African and Native blacks do not call out numbers of personnel to say, who do you think you are? To sit there and try to act like or pretend or pseudoly trying to sit there and attach themselves to black pain. It's atrocious. See, again, supremacists knows this. Supremacy knows this, right? And again, no reparations. What an insult, right? See, they'll tell people like critical race theory, well, we don't need to teach, the kids or whoever else about critical race theory. We don't want to sit there and for people to think that, within the country, it's racist. What are you talking about? See, because it wasn't predominant based numbers of personnel within a predominant based culture that was not being enslaved, removed from a continent, brought up to America. See, you got personnel with predominant based culture, can try to play the little devious, little atrocious game because it wasn't numbers of that person's people who was removed from a continent. Or the personnel say, because again, that's a different topic because again, however the Native blacks that was already sitting in the was sitting in the North America continent before I don't want to go there right now. So I will just say this. It's very atrocious that you got personnel that say, well, black folks need to get over the past. I had nothing to do with slavery. I had nothing to do with it. But watch this. How many of the same personnel get very quiet if you sit there and checkmate them and say, okay, did you have anything to do with the removal of what we call Native Americans? Did you have anything to do with that? Well, no. You sure you didn't? Because the Trail of Tears was around about 200 years ago. You sure didn't have anything to do with that? No. Right? I mean, just pick a culture, pick an ethnicity, pick a turn to lifestyle category, pick whatever you want to pick, and ask the personnel. Know the personnel within the predominant culture. Ask, did you have anything to do with removing what we call Native Americans from their land? And of course, it's logical answer, because personnel will say, no, I ain't got nothing to do with that. I wasn't even alive 200 years ago. Oh, so you don't have a problem with what we call Native Americans, right, getting numbers of reparations. Then you get quietness, because now you didn't checkmated people. Because they know how silly this sounds, that you're going to sit there and numbers of people going to tell American blacks, not talking about sellouts. Sellouts can go jump into a volcano because they don't realize they're being used. But to sit there and tell the American blacks, the ones that's not sellouts, that, hey, man, just get over the past. But they won't tell numbers of Native Americans, stop talking about them white men took your land. You see how silly that sounds, right? But at the same time, tell black folks to get over the past, right? But in 1776, since that's utilized so much every year, July the 4th, 1776, right? Oh, the day that the colonists decided to sit there and form their own United States, right? Because they're tired of some bad personnel trying to tell them what to do. Oh, man, July the 4th, 1776 every year. Oh, my goodness. Woo, my goodness. And it had nothing to do with American blacks. What was going on in 1776 toward American blacks? Were they free? Of course not. The majority of black folks was in what? Slavery or enslavement. Going through what? Black pain. Do you see where I'm coming from? This nonsense that the continuation of just like an earth-size slap in the faces of many African-American Native black personnel. Numbers don't even realize how illogical and inhumane the treatment for generations and toward American blacks, that for generation, and to tell them to get over the past. So no restorative justice in some kind of way of reparations of something, but the same darn time they gonna sit there and give reparations to what we call numbers of Native Americans. What an extreme joke in itself. And then you utilize 1776, and then you sit there and go, what? Only a few generations later to 1863. Right? 1862, around that time frame, where what? The Emancipation Proclamation. Right? It took effect in 1863, January 1st, 1863. So from 1776 to 1863. That is what? Several generations later. What was going on between 1776 and 1863? Were black folks being treated as equal? You mean? I don't think so. The majority of African ancestors, Native blacks, were still in what? Enslavement. Do you see the nonsense of how it sounds when you sit there and put logical analysis to look at that, just that part, right? Again, half to one generation left for the American black survival overall, right? It's like going back to the thing about white supremacy, right? That's an old word. It's an old word. But again, you got personnel from no Pacific cultures, numbers of personnel with a predominant culture, no Pacific numbers of ethnicities, and however number of personnel from percentage personnel from within the eternal lifestyle category, however numbers of personnel that bring up white supremacy. Right? And however many of them don't know what they're even talking about. That is an old terminology. Right? And you got personnel that don't know that is an old terminology. Now, no telling how far it goes back, but let me just utilize this. There is a book called The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. With that, I should just relate. And a book called The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. This book was written around 1921, 1928. That's 100 years ago almost. Well, from 1921, that would be 100 years from now. So that's about 4 generations ago. What I just sit and read the title of that book, and you got personnel 4 generations from 1921 to the present time in 2021, still talking about white supremacy as if that's some kind of newfangled word. In 1921, there was only still three major cultures in the country of America. What we call numbers of Native Americans, which still wouldn't have been a lot then anyway. 2, what? But be related to race, you'd have had under white. And 3, you would have sit there and had black. That would have been the only 3 major races by demographics in 1921. You said, what about the Hispanics? What about? That wouldn't even been a significant even conversation in 1921 about when you say Hispanics. And certainly 1921, you wouldn't have no significant conversation about when you say Asians, because again, see the conversation again, which Asians you're talking about, which Hispanics you're talking about. Because again, you're talking about that wasn't even significant demographically, but when a few personnel from a certain section of Asia start coming over on the western coast of the country, right, related to the California gold rush. Prior to that, you was not going to have some gigantic amount of what we call Asians from a certain section of Asian coming to America. So you got personnel that can go jump into a volcano and trying to play deflectionary tactics, right? Because again, there was only three major demographical personnel in the country in 1921. But again, how many personnel present time are benefiting off what black pain that black folks had to go through in 1921 still? That was going on after 1865, which was supposed to be the ending of the Civil War. So why is it that still that the African and Native blacks still weren't being treated equal, still was treated like inhumane people, still weren't being treated as citizens, still couldn't sit there and vote? And here it is in 2021, you got personnel trying to play these little, voting rights. What are you talking about? Black folks were supposed to get voting rights way back in 1868 or 1870. Huh? When the Civil War didn't even free slaves. Not all people, they didn't free all the black folks in 1865. That nonsensical lie. So all black folks wasn't free. And they certainly could not vote. See, that's why the 13, 14, 15 Amendment Constitution was so relevant. And you got personnel that have utilized the 13, 14, and 15 Amendment Constitution for their own agenda. When again, in 1865, 1868, right, 1870 time frame, different things like that. I'm just saying that you got personnel up to this present moment that are utilizing 13, 14, and 15 Amendment Constitution for their own cultural agenda. That's an insult. That is such an insult. And so the thing about it again, it's just like in this book called Propaganda, right? That was written in 1928. Again, almost 4 generations ago, in a book called Propaganda. Let me just read a piece of it under what is called organized chaos. Because this kind of stuff like this cannot be said enough. Chapter 1 under Organizing Chaos. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Let me put this again. Chapter 1 under Organizing Chaos in the book called Propaganda that was written around 1928, 4 generations ago. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. That's power. That is power, right? And so again, the intelligent manipulation of the masses. So that also goes along to the masses of personnel from again Pacific culture and cultures, ethnicities, numbers of alternative categories, numbers of person predominant-based culture, however many within those realms, right, are benefiting off of black pain. It's like the thing with people being allowed to call themselves people of color. What other cultures, ethnicities, alternative lifestyle categories, you name it, was on the plantation for generations more than African ancestors, Native Black people? Go ahead and tell me those categories that were on the plantations, just as the numbers of African ancestors, Native Blacks were on plantations. And at any time can be separated or were separated. Moms being separated from their children at any darn time. Males being separated from their families any time. Moms being separated from their families any time. For generations. It's like what I like to call the deer effect, right? A gazelle effect, antelope effect, what do you want to call it? Prairie dog effect. Keep going. Gopher effect. Keep going. Right? When you say, wait a minute for a sec, why are they all on edgy? Well, they kind of edgy a little bit. They hear a noise or something like that, and they pounce out somewhere, going back under the ground, right? Sprint off. Because that is ingrained within their DNA. So you got the generations of numbers of African Native Black people that have been ingrained with certain types of supremacist, indoctrinated fear. And you got personnel talking about people of color that wasn't even around when African Native Blacks were on plantations for generations. What kind of nonsense is that? But you got people walking around talking about people of color. What an insult. None of the personnel running around talking about, voting rights, disenfranchisement, when black folks were having a problem of being allowed to vote, still going into what? The 1900s. Having a problem to vote, still going on, still in the later 1800s. And here it is, several generations later, you got supremacists playing these little mad games and allowing these other cultures and demographical person that wasn't even around in any significance, let alone numbers of ones that weren't even around the country, sitting there benefiting on black pain. What an insult. And that stuff is really not brought up. It's not really brought up. It's like the thing with the N word, right? You got personnel that sit there and play oxymoronic, deflectionary tactics of true silliness, of sitting there putting the blame on numbers of African and Native Blacks who use the N word, as if that's some normalcy among numbers of other African and Native Blacks who do not use that word, right? And how audacioustic and atrocious does it sound when you got numbers of personnel from within a predominant-based culture who do use that word, however numbers of other ethnicities, ones that do use that word, however numbers of personnel within certain types of alternative lifestyle categories who use that word. That is sickening. So you want to use the word that was that was produced by numbers of personnel within a predominant-based culture as a hatred-based word. Call numbers of black folks the N-word. And you got personnel within a predominant-based culture that had a super nerve. The black folks call themselves, you sound like a super fool. You sound like a wannabe plantation owner. You sound like an evil type of rock giant. You're sounding pathetic. And you're sounding atrocious. That you want to use a word that you had slave owners and however type of other racial terrorist type personnel that was saying that toward black folks, not as a term of endearment. And here it is, you got personnel from different other cultures, ethnicities, however personnel from alternative lifestyle categories that also numbers of them that are using that word as well. That's atrocious. And there's not enough of African and Native blacks that are checkmating people saying that nonsense. Because if you're from a different culture, ethnicity, parts of a term lifestyle category, and you got to use that word, then you are atrocious. So what? Somebody within the black culture use it. That's on them. Oh, they use it. So what? Do you think somebody from predominant-based culture, well, it's not even a comparison. I'm not going to waste my energy on that. So say a person was in certain types of Asian culture, certain types of Hispanic cultures, and let's say the word was called Pachacto. You Pachacto, right? And say somebody was a slave owner, and they called numbers of Asian person Pachacto, or call Hispanic person Pachacto. I'm just giving an example. Generations and generations and generations ago, Pachacto, because they didn't want to call them by any kind of name because they were just no better than cattle, right? On plantations. And Pachacto was some kind of word like a N word. It's not, but I'm just giving an example, right? And generations later, right, that's supposed to be after the Civil War. Generations later, that's supposed to be after the Civil Rights Movement. Generations later, when supposed to be former segregation supposed to be ended, and still 2000, the early parts of the 21st century, you got personnel calling numbers of Hispanic person, numbers of Asians Pachacto, right? But it's a bad word that wouldn't be tolerated. So if African ancestors, Native blacks was sitting there saying, "What's up, my Pachacto?" that wouldn't be tolerated. Well, and numbers of black folks say, "Hey, man, numbers of Asian people call each other Pachacto. Numbers of Spanish personnel call each other Pachacto." They be like, "I don't care what you say. You better not say it." And that conversation is stopped. But that's not what numbers of African ancestors, Native blacks are doing to people and checkmating people and calling people out. Don't do that. Right? To use that word. So it's like the thing with, again, numbers of Asian personnel that can't stand other Asians, numbers of Hispanic personnel that can't stand other Hispanic personnel. Now, credit given to them Asian personnel that ain't falling for, the racial connotations that maybe numbers of other Asian personnel have toward black folks. Credit given to numbers of Hispanic personnel that don't sit there and fall into that racial hatred as numbers of other Hispanics do, right, toward black folks. Right? And credit given to numbers of Asian and numbers of Hispanic personnel who understand that within their culture there is also intra-conflict with one another, determined about what province, what country, what state, and things like that. They know there's no such thing as some all-around intra-Asian love, some type of all-around all Hispanic love. They know better than that nonsense. Right? So credit given to numbers of Asians, numbers of Hispanics that don't fall for that. Keep doing your thing. So it's like this thing, going back to like numbers of Asian personnel. I'm talking about not, again, you got good and bad. I'm not going to play that game. I already relayed that over what I was saying already. I'm not going to repeat that. I just did that. But so it's just interesting how a law was passed already specific for Asian personnel under the COVID-19 umbrella, and specifically talks about Asians, right? Hate crimes, trying to protect Asian personnel. And most people don't ask which Asian you freaking talking about, right? Just generically. I mean, Visa Asia, that's very generic. Which part of Asian? Or which Asian you talking about? But regardless, bam, it didn't take long at all, right? A couple of months or less to get a bill passed specific for Asians, right? But they can't find no law specifically to help out black folks, right? With laws of hatred toward them, right? But you're sitting there, they don't like Asians, Asian hatred, and all that kind of stuff. You get another person that got the freaking audacity. Oh, black folks, they're going against Asian and all that nonsense, right? and have a nerve, because again, numbers of African Native blacks better wake the freak up and understand there's numbers of Asian people that can't stand black folks. Just like numbers of Spanish people that can't stand black folks, right? Don't get it. That numbers of, don't get this, right? It's like, I'm just gonna play you, because this can't be played enough on this. It cannot be played enough. Let me just, show an example, okay? Let me just show an example.
What's the issue?
What's up?
Why are you coming over here?
I just want to see what you guys are taking pictures of.
Why is it your business?
Well, you know what? This is my home.
Okay, mine too. Why are you taking pictures of me?
Where do you live?
I live in Scottsdale. Why are you taking pictures of me?
Michigan plates?
Yeah. Why are you taking pictures of me?
Well, you know what? We've had problems here.
I don't care. You don't know me. Why are you taking pictures of me? And I don't know you. Do you know a lot of white men are doing racist things in this world, sir?
No.
You don't know that? You're not aware of that?
I'm a racist.
You are a racist.
I'm a racist.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay? So
what's
the
your
issue?
point? Why are you here?
Because this is a no zone.
Oh my goodness. See, a lot of mainstream media, they don't play stuff like that, because that defeats the narrative of what they're trying to darn do. And how about, where's all these other different various types of Asian personnel that ain't bringing that up? I'm not talking about the number of small amounts that try to credit given to you. At the same time, Asian supremacy don't care, because there's an agenda with that. But it's interesting that that kind of stuff is not brought up. You heard what the person said. That ain't me. You heard what they allegedly said. And by the way, things that's not in public domain. I'm utilizing that as fair usage doctrine. So you heard what the person said. They had the freaking nerve to be nosy. What black folks were doing, they mind their business and just rolled up on them like, what do you think? Like they were nothing or something, right? And then what if there was some black folks that did the same thing to that Asian person, right? What are you doing? What's going on? And then say the black man says something about to the Asian person, hey man, this is a derogatory word, right? This is no, what's the word? Amarillo. I think that's yellow. If it's not, forgive me. But whatever the word yellow means in Spanish, Amarillo, maybe not, who knows? I'm trying to remember. But I'm just saying, what if they walked up and did that? This is no Amarillo if that's yellow, or whatever the Spanish word for yellow is, zone. Oh my goodness, man, that'd have been blurred out all over different kind of media. Oh, they said no yellow zone, and that black man says, oh yes, he's a racist. Oh man, that'll fit in that narrative so well. But see, that's why I'm saying that too many numbers of African and Native blacks are not checkmating numbers of Asian personnel that are doing this. And they surely are not demanding this from political personnel, especially numbers of black political personnel, right? That how many of them jumped on board with that COVID-19 law that was specific for Asians as well? What an insult, right? What an insult on that. But let's go another again. Let's go to another example that cannot be shown enough.
Hey, listen. Buddy, I am recording. You can finish talking to the girl. Under the contract, yeah? She gave me the money.
I
Exactly.
don't know who you think we are.
She has the right to live here. She does want to live here.
This is what's going to happen.
Okay, finish talking
They're
to the
going to call the
police.
police. The police are going to come here.
Buddy, I don't care if the police come here. They can come. I need the police to come here.
If the guys did not do any crime, which you guys didn't, then you guys should get the money, right? So we're gonna wait for the police. Because I don't know anything about what's going on. All I know is that you guys came here and asked for money, okay? And that's because it's not like a robbery where you guys are pulling a gun out.
What kind of gun you have? I don't have no
You
gun.
guys have a...
Oh, I need it. Yeah,
What did he say?
I talk. I am with my wife and my
Yo, guys,
son. Yeah,
Guys,
they
listen.
just threatening us. Yeah.
Guys,
So
this is my
I
Asian
think
parents.
they have a gun. Yeah.
You s- you see that nonsense? What this particular Asian person said, the outright lie that they didn't have what they said they have or what they had, outright lied. You know what? I'm sorry. Let me repeat. Let me play it again. I stopped there a little too early. Let me show this again. Okay.
Hey, listen.
Buddy, I am recording you. You can finish talk to the police.
Under the contract, yeah, she gave me the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know who you think we are.
She have the right to live here.
She
Yeah.
does want to live here.
But
This is what's gonna happen.
Okay, finish talking
They're
to the
gonna call the
police.
police. The police are gonna come here.
Buddy, I don't care if the police come here. They can come. I need the police to come
We
here.
just want to
If you guys did not do any crime, which you guys didn't, then you guys should get the money, right? So we're gonna wait for the police. 'Cause I don't know anything about what's going on. All I know is that you guys came here and asked for money, okay? And that's because it's not like a robbery
what
where you
kind
guys are
of
pulling a
the
gun
police
out.
asked? What kind of
Wanted
gun
to
you
live
have?
here.
I don't have no
You
gun.
guys have a-
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I need it.
Actually, my wife showed the gun. Yeah.
What do you say?
I talk. I am with my wife and my
guys,
son. Yeah.
Guys,
They are threatening us. Yeah.
Guys,
So
this is my
I
Asian
think
parents.
they have a gun. Yeah.
You heard that? They're threatening us. They think we have a
Yeah, we have
gun.
that.
That's crazy.
My wife said they have a gun.
She never said that, bro. Yeah, you're a shitbag. Fuck you.
Transfer? You want my email? Yes. Okay. I'll send it to your number. 6 plus 5. No, I need now. I'm not leaving until I get the full amount.
How do I know?
This is only 4.
That's him. Oh, Lord.
No, I didn't. But my wife called that.
Oh my God, I would love for you to search this car just so you can carry on.
Look how many police officers here from what somebody said there's a gun here. Think about what you're saying. Look how many police cars are here.
Just to try and get us to hurry up, get away
Maybe
from
my
you.
wife, because I didn't say.
Well, who called? Maybe you should bring your wife out
You can
about
ask,
this. I'm asking you! Who called?
I called.
So who said there's a gun here? Who said there's a gun here? Did you say yes?
Okay,
This is a landlord tenant act. It's nothing to do with the police. Who said there's a gun here? Look how many cars are
I
here.
didn't. I told them I didn't see the gun.
I mean, this is not funny over nothing. The outright lie. You saw this particular agent personnel said that there was a, you know what? Again, that was disgusting. Could you imagine if that was vice versa and you got, black personnel, man, wife, say son, I'm just giving an example. And that, similar situation. And you had an Asian man, an Asian woman in the car and doing that same thing and then call enforcement and said, there was this type of equipment. And all of a sudden law enforcement all around. And then, they found out that this black man was sitting there lying. Do you realize that how that would be blurred out on all kind of stations and newspapers and articles? Oh, here we go again. Black males, black personnel hating on Asian personnel. Oh, this is an epidemic. It's disgusting, people. Numbers of African ethnic blacks better wake the freak up. Better wake up. Not pseudo wake up, truly better wake up. It ain't just numbers of personnel within the Padang-based culture. I got all that on that. I understand all that. But it is insulting to the foremothers and forefathers of the African and Native Black personnel that went through this nonsense then, and still a lot of the elders, that some of them that's still alive now, said anyway, that's still now, right, that might be in their 80s and 90s, hundreds. To imagine, this is 1921. So, excuse me, this is 2021. Think about personnel that was born in 1921. And say a few years after that, where, you know, they may have been an infant, but I'm saying, you know, a few years later, right, when they might have been 10 years old or 8 years old or 12, depending on, because you know how somebody can say, oh, I remember I was 8 years old, this happened and all that kind of stuff. It's like the thing about, like, you know, the very few amount of people that's alive that from the Tulsa race riot in the 1920s. Could you think about that for a second? That atrocious treatment of black folks that has never happened to Asians, never happened to Hispanics, never happened to numbers of what we call Native Americans. Their towns were not bombed like that. They were not machine gunned down like that. And that included what? Veterans that were shot down like nothing. Houses broken in, vandalized. That didn't happen to nobody else like that. That was only about 4 generations ago. But you got numbers of African and Native blacks allowing people to call themselves people of color. And however numbers of personnel within the predominant-based culture that are deflecting, with very few exceptions, and they sit there and give off, Juneteenth thing situation now. Symbolism. Where is the tangibleness of reparations for black folks? What an insult. No tangibility on that. But let's keep going, right? Because again, like I was saying about the numbers of Hispanic person, you got good and bad. The good ones keep doing your thing. At the same time, numbers of African ancestors better wake the freak up. There are quite no Hispanic person that can't stand their guts. And numbers of Hispanic person are the ones that are good. You know what I'm talking about. And credit given to the ones that don't fall for that, right? Keep doing your things. But let's just show something on that part, okay? Let's just show something.
We remain a hunted people. Now you think you have a destiny to fulfill in this land that historically has been ours for 40,000 years. And we're a new mestizo nation. This is our homeland. We cannot, we will not, and we must not be made illegal in our own homeland. We are not immigrants that came from another country to another country. We are migrants free to travel the length and breadth of the Americas because we belong here. We are millions. We just have to survive.
So you got personnel that's telling numbers of African and Native blacks what they really think. That is called Aztlan, by the way. It's called Aztlan. A-Z-T-L-A-N. A-Z-T-L-A-N. Aztlan. That is overall means the basically settling, should I say, of the Southwest states by numbers of Hispanic personnel. That's what in general Aztlan means, right? On whatever direction that the numbers of Hispanics want to do. So again, just like you have numbers of black folks that are good, that are bad, right? You got numbers of Hispanics that are good and bad. You got numbers of Hispanic personnel that can't stand un-Hispanic personnel because there's a major agenda. And if they're not on the same playbook as other Hispanics, they look down upon them, right? But again, numbers of African and Native blacks want to keep pretending that just say Hispanics as if that means, right, friend. I sit there and just showed you, for people who have not heard this before, about Aztlan. You got no Hispanic persons that are not black folks as friends. The only two major cultures for so many generations, demographical wise, I'm talking about numbers wise, was white and black. The two top population demographics, right? around what, pre 2000, look, not too much before 2000 or slightly after 2000, African ancestors native blacks fell to the number 3 population in the country. And if you're talking, not if nothing, so African ancestors native blacks going through all that racial terrorism for many generations, right? All this time when they were the second largest population, what in the toad's tongue do you think that is going to sit there and, what happened now that they're the third largest population and the fourth largest population is Asians, and Asian population is just gigantically moving up. Black folks have the lowest amount of businesses, but you got the black folks talking about get more businesses. Now that's different to say, okay, none of the black folks need more businesses, economics, but to think for numbers of ones that try to think that they will somehow climb up past many people, that is a fantasy world. It's not going to happen. Asians have more businesses than black folks, and they are the 4th largest population in America. You do the math. You do the social construct. You do the economic construct. You do the political future construct, and you look at it. The only way that numbers of African ancestors and native blacks have not just been finished off quite yet is because people still can use numbers of black folks for voting. That's all. And that eventually is going to be extremely reduced down. Right? But before I finish off what I'm going to say on that part, the thing it's like when I sit there and showed you those videos, but at the same time, right, you got personnel that want to sit there and blur out talking about black on black crime, black on black crime, black on black crime. When the earlier conversation about, the Asian hatred, people Asian hatred on that, right? All that kind of stuff, right? But at the same time, let's look at 2019 crime reporting statistics, right? Now I'm just gonna make this real fast on this, okay? 48% of the victims of crimes were motivated. 48.5% were victims of crimes motivated by the offender's anti-black or African American bias. Okay? This is relating to hate crime. 48.5% were victims of crimes motivated by the offender's anti-black or African American bias. 14.1% were victims of anti-Hispanic or Latino bias. Let me repeat that again. 14.1% were victims of anti-Hispanic or Latino bias. So which one is more, 48.5% or 14.1%? Okay. 4.4% were victims of anti-Asian bias. Let me repeat that. 4.4% were victims of anti-Asian bias. So what is more, 48.5% of the hate crimes were going against anti-black, or 4.4% were victims of anti-Asian bias? Which one is more? But at the same time, numbers of black political personnel and supremacist personnel and other political personnel, etc., can't sit there and find a law specific for black folks. What an insult. But at the same time, how many personnel can't jump over enough tables of trying to sit there and help illegal immigrants out? Border breaking personnel that sit back laughing. And interesting still, an epidemic crisis is at the border. This going across just skimming across the darn border like it's not nothing. Border breaking illegal immigration personnel. What a freaking insult. It's a disgusting game, right? Because it's like every few years, somebody come up with, they trying to hold back the children. They're only coming across the border, with their parents, their guardians, whoever, trying to find a better life. Man, bull crap. I'm not going to go on all this, but I don't know how many times this has happened, but there was something not too long ago where they came out and was talking about how there was higher numbers of personnel that were bringing children across that border, right? And they found out that they were not even the parents or guardians or any relatives associated with that child or children. People don't want to talk about that on that. So they sit there and bring different kind of children, and it's like this game a little bit. Watch this for a second. 10-year-old black child, you may say, he went to a store and got some bubble gum or something like that. Maybe, got some situation happening. They say, oh, he stole this. Right? Are they gonna feel sympathy for that child? Right? Oh, he should have did that. Or numbers of black children in schools, right? That's sitting there struggling, reading, struggling of math, struggling with communication skills. How many people, predominant culture, other personnel, oh, well, that's on them. But at the same time, how many of the personnel can't get enough of trying to get illegal immigration personnel across that border and help out however many children, getting free food, right? But they'll sit there and show number of the children all bunched up in some kind of facility. But they don't show however many facilities out there that it's not like that. And ask the question, when those children leave those facilities, what happens to those children? Who takes care of those children when they sit there and eventually overall go off into whatever sunset, into whatever homes or whatever it is, or to a person's parents who also however knows that broke immigration laws, or whoever the ones that been here for some time, or whatever the instant situation. Or what about the numbers of border breaking legal immigration personnel that are held up for a second or two, and they sit there by taxpayers' money on airplanes or buses, and just free of charge, go off to the sunset, and when however numbers in there are supposed to report back to talk about their case, they don't show back up. See, I'm the kind of person, I know this game extremely well. And it's disgusting that this is really not talked about among numbers of African estimated blacks. Because it's a disgusting game, right? Because that's a form of non-justice reparations. Where do you think this money comes from to sit there and house the children, feed them, clothe them, however the ones on the internet? How about the border breaking legal immigration adults? Who's sitting there? That costs money to feed them, right? House them. Who sits there and pays for bus trips, plane trips? Who pays for that? But people don't want to talk about that. In 1986, there already was what you would call a comprehensive immigration reform. That was the last major one. That was supposed to resolve a lot of the border security. So from 1986 to 2021, there's still an epidemic going at that border. So you got personnel talking about comprehensive immigration reform. Other words, giving amnesty to border breaking illegal immigration personnel, but at the same freaking time, they tell those African estimated blacks to get over things in the past, to pull themselves up, not by just bootstrap, just pull your own darn sailboat up by its own sail. Don't ask for no freaking help. Go out there and catch your own freaking fish. Don't ask for, some bait to help out with that. Go dig your own bait. What an insult. Let me read you something. Section 115 of Immigration National Act, something to that effect. Enforcement of the immigration laws of the United States. It is the sense of the Congress that the immigration laws of the United States should be enforced vigorously and uniformly. And you got an epidemic of border breaker, legal immigration personnel breaking immigration laws laughing, because they know exactly what they need to do when they break immigration laws, and they know exactly where they need to go to sit there and have what? Free prenatal care. Free food resources. Free medical and dental resources for that person's child or children. Free. But they're going to tell African estimated blacks to get their hands out of my entitlements. But the same knows the personnel within the predominant culture who again gets the most food stamps, who gets the most free resources, right? even farming that gets the most entitlement with farming subsidies. But at the same time, high numbers of them don't want black farmers getting subsidies. What an insult. The numbers of African ancestors, Native blacks better sit there and wake the freak up. Again, half a generation to one generation left for the American black survival. This would not go slightly the way it's going if there was another culture affected the way of the things I've sit there and read about and shown. This would not be accepted at all. It's almost like a extreme Jupiter-sized slap in the faces, right, of numbers of African ancestors, Native blacks, and the forefathers and foremothers of African ancestors, Native blacks to go through what they went through, died. They didn't die to go through horses running them over by racial terrorism. They didn't die or want to experience water hoses. They didn't die or have those bad memories of sitting there watching a family member getting lynched, right? Or having racial terrorism terrorize them by the Night Riders of the Ku Klux Klan. And show me what a Ku Klux Klan, by the way, was sitting there attacking numbers of Hispanic personnel left and right like they were doing black folks. Show me where they were sitting there attacking, grabbing people up out of their houses, Asian houses, and sitting there hanging people up. Show me where. Because there's no freaking comparison. But you're going to sit there, the numbers of African ancestors and Native blacks going to allow people to call themselves people of color without going through the type of cultural pain as black folks have been through for so freaking long, going through their own black pain. What an freaking insult. What an freaking insult. Just as I'm going to stop right here, because this can't be said enough either. It's called The White Man's Bible, 1980s. The White Man's Bible. Kind of going back to the N-word part. The N-word or N-word. We use the term N-word deliberately in this book and recommend its usage in general conversation. As we have stated in a previous chapter, the second dumbest creature on the face of the earth is one who can't, or won't recognize its enemies. And the dumbest of all is that creature which will actively collaborate with its enemies for the destruction of its own race. Let me repeat this again on the White Man's Bible, 1981, around that time frame. N-word or N-word. We use the term N-word deliberately in this book and recommend its usage in general conversation. As we have stated in a previous chapter, the second dumbest creature on the face of the earth is one who can't or won't recognize its enemies, and the dumbest of all is that creature which will actively collaborate with its enemies for the destruction of its own race. I want to show you this last video, and I want you to imagine now for different cultures, etc., that will be looking at this near future or way on down the road, right? That may not understand a lot about the atrocities that went against the American blacks and still do, right? Because this is about an historical timepiece on shows like this I'm doing, be it 5 years from now, 1 year, 5 months, 15 years, somebody listens to us down the road, and then you look at what I'm relaying over and information, and the ones that have done some research and ones that say haven't, but just happen to come across this podcast or etc. See, you look at the time you're listening to present moment, and you look at the time of whenever down the road, near future, far future, and you see how still nothing has changed at all, and it's getting worse. That's why I will say this again, and I will mean what I say on that, and I won't change my mind because it's not going to get better on this. African ancestors, Native blacks have only half a generation to one generation left. It is not going past that. Doesn't make a difference. Someone in denial, they can't accept that reality that the African ancestors, Native blacks are overall finished as a collective. because there's too many problems. Because if you cannot get laws and policies passed, then you are falling behind. Different cultures, different ethnicities, numbers of personnel within a turn-based category understand that you must have political power. You must get laws and policies passed or and enacted for their own benefit. So the thing about it again, what other cultures, ethnicities, alternative lifestyle categories, etc., was went through the continuous racial terroristic onslaught toward their people and imagery, racial terroristic imagery toward their people in such a heinous way. There's no comparison. So I want to show this last particular video.
Oh, I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. As I grind to Louisiana, my true love for to see. Oh, it rained so hard the day I left, the weather it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry, oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. I've come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. Oh, I had a dream the other night when everything was still. I thought I saw Susanna dear a-coming down the hill. The buckwheat cake was in her mouth, the tear was in her eye. Says I was a-coming from the south. Susanna, don't you cry, oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. I've come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. Oh.
There'll be quite a number of personnel that have not seen this. Because again, this is not about one particular culture, ethnicity. Oh yeah, I saw that before. This is because again, this is not about right now. This is about down the road when somebody maybe comes across this video or podcast, should I say, and it's come across this who may not have seen this themselves, or maybe some personnel within the African ethnic blacks that's, oh, I haven't seen this in a long time. And you look at then, this is going on, and see now the number one culture that still has this imagery toward them is obviously the American black in some kind of way. Do you sit there and hear about more personnel wearing Asian face or yellow face or brown face more than people talking about black face? Of course not. You still got people walking around and getting in trouble having black face on, right? And it ain't just none of the personnel from the predominant-based culture doing that, right? So just like I was saying about the border breaking legal immigration personnel, I must show this for a second. Now, this is a few years ago, but it's still the context of this about border breaking illegal immigration personnel.
Illegal immigration is not only a burden on our environment and our population, but also our wallets. Especially in tough economic times, an additional financial burden is difficult to handle. The annual cost of illegal immigration is estimated at $113 billion to our nation's taxpayers. A proposal to allow illegal aliens permanent access to U.S. jobs makes no sense when you recognize that this would keep many current U.S. citizens from getting jobs. Not only can illegal immigration limit U.S. workers' job opportunities, but it can affect their income as well. Illegal immigrants are often paid less than their legal counterparts, leading not only to exploitation, but a lowering of wages and working conditions for everyone. Households headed by illegal aliens imposed more than $28.8 billion in costs on the federal government in 2009 and paid only $9.5 billion in taxes. This created an annual net fiscal deficit of almost $19.3 billion. Many companies that hire only legal workers are forced to compete with companies that undercut prices by hiring illegal workers. This threatens to force the responsible company out of business. One of the things which makes this country great is how much we provide for the people who reside here. Even individuals who are here illegally benefit from our tax dollars. Expenditures like educating children, medical care, administration of justice, child care, temporary assistance to needy families, and school meal programs all end up benefiting illegal aliens.
It don't get no clearer than that. half a generation to one generation left of the American Black survival overall. Because what I sit there and have relayed over, it it's just purely logical analysis for for this conversation I've had for about an hour here. And it's very tiring because it's so ridiculous on a reality that is happening, like a 2-ton, 4-ton, 6-ton asteroid that's heading to the earth. And you got, I'm just giving them, you got personnel that's in a false belief of relaxation that nothing will ever happen to the earth like the dinosaurs. Now that might be some astronomical talking about, example, but I don't want to go into all that. But just saying that, just like people talk about, or numbers of personnel that's still in fantasy world about the climate change going on, but still personnel that want to talk about the reason behind of different examples why, right? But see, supremacists only want to make sure the narrative is shown on the way that they want to show, and numbers of personnel believing that. But the situation that people know, when you, all thing I do is look up and you see those crisscrossing patterns going across the sky, and some people think that is normal, and many personnel don't even pay attention to that. But again, that's a different type of topic. But just relaying for things I've sit there and shown, personnel have not seen those, and personnel have. Either way, it's still half a generation to one generation left for the American Black survival. So then when it comes down to it, is that numbers of individual African ancestry Native Blacks, right, to do for themselves as best as possible, right? And for some of the ones of different cultures that are not into that racial terrorism bias, and numbers of African ancestry Native Blacks want to just, talk with other different cultures, just in general stuff. But ultimately, African ancestry Native Blacks need to understand, just like the greatness of Dr. Clark, Dr. Henry Clark, or John Henry Clark, excuse me, the great cultural grand teacher that wrote so many great books and so many great videos where he talking about how basically you have no friends. Not about in a literal sense, but the saying of that, when numbers of African Native Blacks thinking that the people they think are their friends are really not their friends in the long term. Talking about social and economic and political and et cetera, et cetera. African Native Blacks understand that time has passed for any type of collective empowerment. It's past. There is no such thing as mathematical equations. Well, it might change. Not happening. That time has passed. Half a generation to one generation left. And I wanted to make sure I put that at the ending of this podcast. So then maybe down the road, somebody, listen to this video, or listen to this podcast, and 5 years, 10 years down the road, 20 years, and say, whoop, I guess that guy was kind of right. Look at the collective destruction even more now of the African Native Blacks, because a culture that has so much historical power relating to historical achievements that set the path for so many other cultures, ethnicities, numbers of personnel for the Turner-based culture to be able to have resource and a lot of beneficial things because of Black pain by numbers of African Native Blacks. When credit should be given to that, and homage should be paid toward the African Native Blacks for generations who have went through so much, and even present time. It's not about the sell-offs. They can jump out, they can sit there and jump off a cliff. But I'm saying that the honor should also be going toward the numbers of African Native Blacks, to say thank them for the stuff that their ancestors have gone through, and still to understand, wow, that they're glad they're not being funny about it, but my goodness, they would say to themselves, or maybe tell some African and Native blacks, wow, it will be difficult to be y'all. And I give y'all, honor for the stuff y'all been through. Because ultimate, right, the only way that African and Native blacks could have sit there and survive this impending onslaught was by building cultural self-confidence and demanding from numbers of black political personnel to have laws and policies specific to black folks, right? And stop trying to say people of color and marginalized people and all that stuff when, again, most people weren't even in this country for the time that African and Native blacks was in this country. So I hope this was an enjoyable show. I appreciate you taking time to listen to it for the present time and ones that listen to it in the future time. I thank you for taking the time to listen to this show of half a generation to one generation left for the American Black survival overall. Thank you for tuning in to the Real CP Show. Appreciate it.